So a while back I had done a couple of videos on tearing apart these Williams Alco PAs. It was kind of an ordeal. I had to blend a couple in order to make the Pennsylvania uh, Tuscan reds and greens that I wanted. So I got, what, 5 of them now. But my takeaway from the Williams was they run really well. And they're very, very simple. They may not have all the bells and whistles, no pun intended, but literally don't. But they do have the vertical can motors, which I think were pioneered by Williams. And, fairly rugged drive line. Well, this one right here is a Lionel. And it has a little bit better detail, possibly. But on the track, it doesn't quite run as smooth or pull quite as hard as the Williams versions. I'm not sure why. I mean, it should. It's got the same kind of weight. And the, trucks are a little bit different. It's interesting that they have 2 powered axles per truck, and then they have a floater like this. Now on the Williams, the floater is like this. It doesn't have a rim. Where the Lionel, the floater has a rim. It kind of helps it track. Is my guess. But I'm wondering on the tight corners whether or not that pulls this center axle a little bit to the inside of the curve, and maybe that's why it doesn't have as much traction. Because, on my track with the unfortunately 031 curves, it doesn't perform quite as well. I mean, I can pull a train. I have some video I'll fold into this. But what I wanted to see was inside this thing. I can see there's a card in there. There's electronics. But I want to see if I can put a little grease into the gear drive between the can motor and the drive axles, the same as I can on the Williams. See if it's just as easy on the Lionel. The later Lionels seem to have gotten to be pretty simple that way, but Williams pretty much plowed the road. MTH followed, and so did K-Line. Lionel eventually took that route, got rid of the Pullmores. So I'm kind of curious. I want to see. Well, the first thing I noticed, I put a little bit of oil on whatever I could see that was a bushing. It's got a brass bushing there, and on this side, I really can't tell on this, but I suspect it probably does. You can see it over here maybe better. That's good. But on this axle right here, it's not a drive axle. There's no bushing. It's just whatever that material is on the truck and the axle. It looks to me like it has the one screw to release the can motor. So we will do that. And looks like 1, 2, possibly 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to try the 4 on the outside first and see if this can come off after. See if it's just the 4 screws. Well, it looks to me like I have on and off, and I'm not quite sure what those are for yet. We'll figure that out when we get inside. There's a lot of features on the Lionels. It seems like it's par for the course. Literally sound, and then of course the electronic E-units and stuff like that. Lionel really prioritize that stuff. That's what I'm seeing every time I take one apart. Where Williams, on the other hand, prioritize having big old flywheel can motors. Less sound, lower price. Alright, let me take this apart. I'll leave it to Lionel to make something unusual. Look at those. And who knows, maybe what they're trying to do is come up with a stronger shell mounting scheme, but that's definitely kind of unusual. Let's see if it's the same up front. Now I'm curious. So it has 6 spots where it has a screw go into the shell. These long guys right here. You can see them right here. So these 2 on the outside go into the shell, but these other 2 really just hold on this plastic piece right here. where the speaker probably is. So that's revelation number 1. Lionel, says Lionel trains, Mount Clemens, I believe it's Michigan. So look at that, it's got a little fan on the inside there too. So far I'm impressed. Yeah, it's unique, but it's Lionel. There is a card, and look at the size of those big old heavy flywheels. That's very cool too. So what I was hearing, I believe, was this wire not rubbing on the flywheel. I heard a little bit of a whine in there, which is why I took this apart. But yeah, I can live with that. That's a rugged looking motor right there. So as compared to the other Lionels I've taken apart, like that big old Conrail 5500 with the Pullmores, this is actually quite impressive. So definitely have upped their game. Little LED lights here. A couple things I see. I like, the way they have the truck mounted there. That's really kind of cool. I like the fact they have a variety of screw connections to the ground. And, this is... I'm going to have to move this out of the way so it's not rubbing on things. Right there. But let's pop off those trucks with the one screw and see how easy it is to grease them and, maintain them. Get those other screws in so this doesn't come apart. But that's the inside of a Lionel PA, Alco PA. Very, very, very cool. Much, much better than I've seen in the past. Including the little engineer guy there. This is pretty nice. Good job. Let's see if I can set the camera up to where I can show what's inside there. And keep my hands out of the way. Let's start with this one right here. It's one screw. Let's see if that does the same thing it does on the MTH and the Williams. That's the game. It does. Motor is out, and if I can just tip it up and not move things like that. Look how big and heavy that gear is. See, now I'm impressed. And this one's thoroughly lubed. It didn't need anything. See that grease? That's good grease. I'm going to shoot some stuff down in there anyway. So I got it apart. Just fill it up with synthetic grease. Put it right back in. But it was already fairly well lubricated. Now this one is different than the Williams in that the actual can motor comes off as compared to the motor in the housing. And that will make this a little more difficult to figure out where to line it up to get it back in. Because there's actually two holes that are threaded on this can motor. I'm sure it doesn't really freaking matter. But to find use that to wind it right down in there. To find that hole is going to be tougher on this than it is on the other brands, because I have to line it up this way. The chances of me finding that hole directly the first time are like very small. But you know something? We did. So there's that one. Just like that. It's nice and smooth. Let's do the other. I think what I'll do is take apart one of the other branded powered trucks so you can see. So this is a Williams right here, right? And the Lionel has a little more structure here than the Williams does with just these two tabs. This too has no bushing, but it kind of floats. But you see what I was saying before, where you have rimmed on the Lionel, but both these are drive. The leading in the middle, but not the trailing. Where on the Williams, you have both the drive wheels driven by gear, and they both have rims. The floater is the one that has no rim. And yeah, that makes the truck kind of swing out further on the 031s. But I do believe because of this, it's why the Williams pulls a little bit harder on my layout with the 031 curves. Now on 072 or something like that, probably a net zero. But on my track, these work better for pulling. But these look better because they follow the track better. How's that? And as far as the gears and stuff are concerned, they're similar. You know, the Williams is just rugged. That's all I can say. You see on the Williams where you have that fitting right there? Let's see if I got a motor. I can show you. No, I don't really. But basically, when you take out the screw, there's an actual fitting on the Williams that it goes into that makes it really easy to line back up. It can only go one way. Where in the Lionel, you got to find the hole in the motor again. And it was easy on this one, but I think it was just dumb luck that it was. You know? All right, let's take the second one out. Let's go to the same process, 2.0. That one was loose for some reason. I just keep backing. I'm not going to take it out if I don't have to. And I'm going to do the same thing while it came out. I'm just going to flop the motor up and out. But look how nice and thick and heavy that drive gear is, you know, on this Lionel. You know, since this grease on here is not caked in there, it's not like hardened or anything, I don't see the need to clean it. Oh, I see what's going to line it up. The Lionel has got these two little divots right here. Here and here, which fit into the holes of the motor, and that's what lines it up. So yeah, that's why I got lucky last time. It was not luck, it was just a different strategy to line the motor up is all. There it goes. So now I can set that screw right back in. See, it's so easy to work on these things. There's no excuse not to, is my point, I guess. You know, there's no excuse to hire someone to do stuff like this, in my most humble opinion. I do notice it has a lock washer, which makes it harder for my big, heavy, numb hands to find. Boy, how do you beat that? You know? Alright, let's just run it on the bench and see what we have here, see if it still works. But that's a painless process. We're going to do a Williams afterwards so we can see the difference. But that's about as painless a maintenance routine as you could possibly have. You know, I'm going to guess there's a gravity component to the E-unit, and it doesn't like working on its side. Yep, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, I'm not seeing any sign of sound on this one, so that must have been some kind of another option. But there's another piece of detail of note. One is these screws are backed with little nuts, so if you just wind them out, chances are that nut drops away and you got to take the shell off anyway. By the way, it's the same underneath there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's the third screw goes to a nut. And I'm going to guess that's just a weight of some kind. Nothing more, nothing less. So there's no sound, just a reverse and some lights. And one switches for the electronic E-unit, and the other is for the lights. That's it, from what I can tell. So what we have here is the Lionel FT that we had just done a service on. You know, we popped those motors out and put them back in and put some grease, you know, where the worm gear connects with the pinion gear on the axle, just like we did on the big Lionel ALCO PA just a few minutes back. But there's some striking differences between, you know, this Lionel here and the one we just worked on. I mean, the Alco PA from Lionel had a big giant motor with flywheels, right? This one doesn't have flywheels. This one does have a speaker and sound, but it's also a battery type system. I have to explore that more. You know, I don't know if I can do the same thing with it I'm doing with the MTHs by getting rid of it with a capacitor. But this is the Lion Chief. It's kind of like the lower end, where the Lionel ALCO PA we worked on is a little bit higher up the food chain, and obviously a much more robust design in parts and stuff like that. Well, here's the Williams Alco FA. You know, I really like these. I like the way they run. I had one that I got with the Pennsylvania shell, and I've got this one right here. And it's more in line price-wise with the Lionel Lion Chiefs. You know, these, they don't break the bank. You can get them used for reasonable money. And of course, they had different iterations over the years, like anything else. But two things strike me immediately. One is they have the same size can motors as this Lionel FT does, right? So I guess that's not a surprise, but it's the flywheels that is a differentiation between the two, I guess. This one has a speaker up here versus underneath. This one doesn't have a battery where the Lionel has a battery. I'm not quite sure. You know, I turned this all off. I don't like the sound of it. You know. But there's another thing I see. Is look how Lionel's got their cards mounted, especially on that PA we just looked at, versus what Williams does. You know, come on, guys. Yeah. But the focus of this video really is just the putting the grease in on the worm gear where it intersects the pinion gear and the axle, right? And the Lionel ALCO PA we just worked on with his big giant motor with his big giant flywheels and also a really large diameter gear. It had the same one screw release that pretty much all this style has. And when the one of the things I had pointed out when I was doing that was the way it centered the motor to make sure you can get things realigned. There was basically bumps on the casting that aligned with the cooling holes in the motor, which kind of let it set right in there. Where on these Williams, you'll see there's an actual fitting that it sits on. You can see it right here. You see that? And that has, you know, well, let me pull out another one of those axles. And it'll have a slot like that where it only can go in one way, right? And that's the difference between, you know, the Williams and what I'm seeing on at least that Alco PA version from Lionel. This one here, by the way, had a very similar arrangement to this, right? And of course, the other thing I saw was the Lionel had more structure in the truck that supported that trailing axle. But also, like I pointed out in the prior video, the Lionel rimmed tires were front and rear. And then even though both of these were driven, the center tire on the Lionel didn't have a rim. And I think that might be one of the reasons why it doesn't pull quite as well on my track. You know, I went into that. Where basically the traction and driven wheels on this Williams, you know, both have rims and keeps it on the rail. Where on the Lionel, that center one can wander to the inside of the radius on those tight radius curves, and it might be why it slips some. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. I'm going to take the camera off and put this back together. Point's been made, and then we're going to pop off these two can motors and shoot some grease down inside there. Well, some other little points of note. Of course, the focus of this video is that the can motors have the same one screw mount. And I had mentioned before that on the Williams, there's a motor mount fitting that kind of falls into that slot, making it really easy to, you know, redo. Versus the one Lionel that had casting bumps on the truck where you had to sort of align the motor, which fit into the cooling holes. Well, the FT Lionel is very much like this right here. You know, and I pointed out the other features already, but there's a couple of other little details of note. For example, the ladder on the FT is actually on the inside versus screwed in to the outside, a little cleaner looking to me, versus having it threaded into sheet metal frame, which really can't be that strong, right? So that's to the Lionel's credit. And I don't know. Yeah, this has got flywheels, but the Lionel had the electronic couplers and more features that way, right? I mentioned the way the boards were mounted. The Lionel had the LED light versus this stuff. But this might be an older iteration, I'm not sure. And another point is that the size of the gears, well, they're brass, but the size is more in line with what the Lionel FT had versus what the older Williams had. This is off a Williams PA. Yeah, just a little smaller, you know. Traction tire here and there. So basically, you know, 2 traction tires per truck. But let me get back to the meat of the video. Let me get to these things and shoot some grease in there. That's really what the heart of this whole video is about. This other stuff is just rambling. See if I can mount the camera. I'll just do one because it should be the same. Pop right out, you know. That's loose. That always makes me nervous. Comes right up and out. Oh, look at that. So that's got a much larger gear than the Lionel FT. That's almost as big as the Lionel PA, so that's impressive. And again, the grease in this one's fine, so I'm just gonna put a little in there, call it good. But I don't know if it'll show. You can see that square right there where there's only one way for it to go back. And that makes it really, really easy to maintain. Pop it right back in there. And the wires out of the way. Wind it right back down in there. That's it. That's all there is to it. Nice and loose. But I think my point is that there's really no excuse not to do the maintenance on these things. It's just so easy to work on them. And let me get some oil in here while I'm here. I'll eventually take these things and stick them in a... Anyway, that's it. Put it back together and put it on the track. So let's just run these a little bit. This is the one we just put grease in the can motor drives. And that's very impressive, that Lionel right there. Pleasantly surprised. And the Williams, I don't know. I guess some sense I was impressed, in some sense I wasn't. I pretty much gave you real-time feedback. But the pinion gear, worm gear on that Williams is quite robust, and I was pleased with that. Let's give them a run. Yeah, that's Alco's whole day. I got a little bit of video to put together here. Yeah, Merry Christmas to you folks who watch this video and support the channel. I very much appreciate it.